Perfect. Hello from slide, hello from slide, hello from slide. Now we just need to adjust this output to actually look like a slide. So to save a little bit of typing and to get us at least 50% of the way immediately, let's just borrow code from banner.php. So jump into banner.php, just select everything in here, copy it into your clipboard, back in slide.php, get rid of this placeholder, and paste in your clipboard. Okay, leave this PHP that fetches the default background image. We can leave that in place. In this HTML down here, get rid of the opening div tag, and then that means we can get rid of the very closing div tag too. Now, on this div that has a class of page banner, BG image, and then it's got the style that outputs the background image, let's leave this div in place, but let's change its class value. So hollow out the class value. It would instead be hero-slider __ slide. Okay, so that div opens here, but then you'll see all on one line, its closing div tag ends on the same line. That's fine. But everything below that, let's just give ourselves a clean slate. Now let's drop down so that we have a new line where this div opens and closes like this. And inside this div, let's just nest a little bit of content. So let's have a div opening and closing and give it a class of hero-slider __ interior space container. Inside that div, let's nest another div, and this will have a class, so opening and closing, give it a class of hero-slider __ overlay, and then a space t-center. This has nothing to do with WordPress. This is just for a specific CSS design. However, inside this innermost div, now we can actually output the dynamic content. So we would just drop into PHP and say echo $content : Let's give that a save and now see what it looks like on the front end. So if I refresh, you might need to move your cursor off of the slideshow, but eventually it'll start sliding through. Perfect. You can also use the dots. So we only have 2 slides. That's why there's only 2 dots. But you can also click and sort of drag to animate forward. Perfect. There's just 2 more details I want to take care of before this feature is complete. So number 1, I want to go adjust our JavaScript so that you can have multiple slideshows per page. Because what if you wanted a slideshow here, but then maybe up at the very top you wanted another slideshow? So I'll show you how to make our slideshow JavaScript dynamic, but first let's take care of the editor screen so that the edit interface actually has the same appearance, right? With the dark semi-transparent black background around the text content. So to fix that, we would just go into our slide.js file and look for the edit component JSX. So for me, it's around line number 59. And we would just replay those same steps. So I would get rid of this overall div with a class of page banner, get rid of the closing matching div. On this opening div, I would change its class to hero-slider __ slide. Then, because its closing div is on the same line, I would drop down. Inside there, I'd have a div with a class of hero-slider __ interior. You can hit tab. Let's also give that a class of container. Inside that div, I'd have a div with a class of hero-slider __ overlay. Hit tab, also give that a class of t-center, and then nested inside that div is where you'd finally have your inner blocks. So you can just move or cut and paste the inner blocks line that we already have right here. Just cut and paste that to live inside our new JSX. And then you can see I still had this unnecessary div down at the bottom with a class of page banner __ content. So I would just get rid of that line of code, give that a save. Back on the edit screen, if we refresh, let me scroll back down to our slideshow. Perfect. Now we've got that exact slide styling going on. Now for our final detail, let's make sure that our slideshow block is very flexible. And what I mean by that is, what if you wanted to have more than one slideshow on a single page? We want to make sure that our JavaScript is resilient. So just for a quick test, let's add a secondary slideshow right about here. So right below the page banner up at the very top. So right about here, I will add, there it is, slideshow. And actually, to save a bunch of clicking, let me undo that. You know what we can do that would be a lot faster? Just copy and paste this instance that we've already set up. We can use this icon up here. So if you hover over it, it reads list view. Let's click on that. And then just click on the overall slideshow. Here it is. So that selects it in its entirety. And then you can just click these three dots here and you can copy and paste, or you can just click the duplicate option. So click duplicate. Cool, so now we've got two slideshows. So you can close the list view, but the idea is now there's an exact clone of it. So let's just move one of them up to live right there. So now we've got our page banner, one slideshow, then our events and blogs, and then another slideshow. So if we save that and refresh the front end, you'll see that our JavaScript is not very resilient. So it's getting confused, right? There's only 2 slides per slideshow, but now there's 4 dots on this first instance of the slideshow. And then if you scroll down, the second slideshow is completely messed up. So this really has nothing to do with WordPress, but I want to show you how to fix this. Essentially, in our text editor, I just need you to jump in to the src folder, and then modules, and then heroslider.js. You can see the code that I originally wrote only looks for a single and sort of the first instance of an element with this class. So there are a million different ways you could adjust this code, but here's what I'm thinking. Before this if statement, but still in the constructor, let's just say const all slideshows equals, and then it would be document.query selector all to select multiple instances, and then string of text .hero -slider. Then right below that, we would just loop through that. So I'd say all slideshows .for each, parentheses to call that. Inside of that, you'd give it a function. So function, parentheses, curly brackets. In these parentheses for the function, make up a parameter name. Could be X, could be unicorn, could be pizza. Let's just name it maybe current slideshow. So now we're just going to loop through, whether there's 2 slideshows on the page or 10. Inside this function, we're going to perform these actions once for each of them. So what I would do now is just borrow this code. So I would begin selecting from this count how many. So I'd place my cursor right there, and then I would just scroll down until the end of glide mount. So I want all of that. I'd cut it into my clipboard. We can get rid of this if statement. We don't need that any longer. And then in this function that we just set up, paste in your clipboard. Cool, now let's just make a few adjustments. So now we want to adjust these selectors to be specific to the current slideshow they're working with. So instead of, on this line, for example, dot count, instead of searching the entire DOM, the entire web page, instead of document.query selector all, this would be current slideshow.query selector, right? So it's specific to that one. Then around line 17, we do the same thing, right? Instead of document.query selector here, it would be current slideshow.query selector. Let's give this a save and test it out. So back on the home page, if we refresh, whoops. So at the end of our code, when we actually leverage glide, so down here, we're creating a variable called lowercase glide, new instance of the glide plugin. We obviously need this selector to be dynamic, right? Instead of just looking for the first instance of this in the DOM. So when you see new uppercase glide, just hollow out this value. Instead of this string of text, it would be current slideshow. Let's give that a save, refresh one more time, and now we are in business. So each slideshow has the correct 2 dots, right? There's 2 slides in each one, and they both function independent of each other. You can even super zoom out just to see that one can advance without the other. And to close out the lesson, I won't bore you with this, but I just spent off camera a little bit of time to type in actual text values and use background images that make sense, right? So an apple a day, free food with the bread image, you get the idea. At this point, our front page template is basically complete. I just need to get rid of this bogus banner block that I added but never used, and then also this bogus query loop block that I never used. So really quick, if I get rid of those, so I'll delete the empty banner block down here and get rid of this welcome to our site heading. Let me just use this icon up here. I'll click on the query loop block as a whole and just choose the 3 dots, remove that. Cool, so from top to bottom, we've got our header, our page banner, our events and blogs, our slideshow, and then our footer. If we save that and refresh the front end, we are in business. From this point forward in the chapter, we're just going to start creating the actual templates for all of the pages you might expect. So single blog posts, single pages, archive screens. If I zoom in a little bit, our custom pages for the My Notes feature, custom post types, right? Like individual professors, the programs, so on and so forth. At the end of this, we're going to end up with a whole collection of templates. So remember our templates folder. We'll have an entire collection of HTML files that use our blocks in different ways, and they will provide sort of the home base that the user can always revert back to. Let's keep our momentum rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson.